All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to this, and welcome to our November community call. Because of some travel uncertainty, Jason and I are recording this call together instead of doing it live, which we always endeavor to do with our monthly community calls. So Jason, thanks for being here, and maybe introduce yourself to get us started in case people aren't familiar with who you are.
My name is Jason Guyett. I am a massage therapist and technically a manual osteopathic therapist, pretty fresh off the boat of it in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I just kind of graduated from this manual osteopathy program. It's a little bit different in Canada than it is other places in the world. So depending where you watch this, it's maybe slightly different, but a lot of similar principles. Manual therapy, kind of regardless. But I was kind of away from TFC for a long time, kind of do that. It was a pretty brief program with just over a year, but yeah, I'm back in full force and trying to get back into things, and yeah, in this community that I adore.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you, man, and congratulations on completing your recent program, because it's not
Thank you very much.
That's not a small accomplishment. And yeah, happy to have you back in action now that you have more bandwidth. And yeah, let's get into it. So agenda today, we're gonna, I'm actually in Australia at the moment, connecting with our Australian team down here, which is sort of like the hub of where a lot of the vision stuff is coming from, because their team has grown and they're doing a lot more of our sort of social media, marketing, product development. So we've gotten a lot of clarity about TFC from just a high level. So I'm just gonna quickly share a few, the why, how, what of TFC. I always try and do that on these calls because it is kind of always evolving as we get more clarity and as we really hone in and focus on what we do best. So I'll go over that quick. We're gonna do some nerd shout outs. We had 2 foot nerds that just graduated from foot nerd training, which is a pretty big feat. It's a 12-week program, an hour a day for 84 days, and it's a tough one. And so we'll give a shout out to them. Then I'd love to talk about software, basically education as software for human hardware. So we can kind of riff on that topic. We'll talk about the golden rules, the daily practice, balance training, and then we'll get into some Q&A, some questions that were sent to Ruth that she forwarded to us from the community. Yeah, so that's the agenda for today. So to start with, I really find Simon Sinek's model of why, how, what to be a really valuable way of really getting clear on, like, why does the company exist? How did they accomplish that reason for being? And what is the company or the organization? So why does TFC exist? In simple terms, we exist to empower people to restore and explore natural foot function. I think that's, I'm going to stick to one sentence for each of these, because I think keeping it brief basically just forces you to get really clear. So we exist to empower people to restore and explore natural foot function. How do we do that? We do that by harnessing the power of story, of play, and harnessing the power of community. And that kind of gets channeled through the software we create, the hardware that we build, and the events that we organize. And then what is TFC? It's a global health community focused on feet. And we're not a foot health community, we're a health community focused on feet. And although that might be like kind of a semantic distinction, I think it's important, because when you try and deal with any element of health in isolation, you kind of miss out on the big picture and you limit the amount of progress you can make. So foot nerds, which Jason and I are both foot nerds, we are sort of the people who are taking this commitment the most seriously. And foot nerd training is essentially a way to really hone our skills of, number one, leading by example and taking radical responsibility for our own foot health, and then also developing the ability to communicate that to others. And so that's what we cover in the 12 weeks. Jason and I are both foot nerds. And once again, thanks for being here. Thanks for your attention. We're going to go for 60 minutes. Next up is nerd shoutouts. So when foot nerds complete their 12-week training, it's a pretty big deal. It's a hard program to complete. It involves putting your work into the public domain and being witnessed by peers. And it also involves teaching a workshop. So Christina F. Bruaroy, I hope I pronounced that well, from Oslo, Norway, just finished her training. And Nick Holt, who's currently in Tamarindo, Costa Rica, also finished. So congrats to you both on completing your 12 weeks of training and delivering your workshops. You're both natural born leaders, and it's an honor to serve alongside y'all in the battle for foot health. So, Jason, let's riff on the topic of, one term that I've been using that I really only started using probably 3 or 4 months ago, um, is this idea of software, right? We're kind of familiar with the software hardware dichotomy in technology, where if I had a phone, or for example, let's take the laptop I'm using right now. The physical laptop itself is the hardware, it's the physical thing. And then the software is the set of instructions that tells the physical thing how to work, how to operate. And I think I've found it to be a really valuable metaphor for humans. And the hardware is essentially our bodies, right? Like these really magical, adaptable, self-healing, self-organizing organisms that we inhabit. That's the hardware. And software is essentially the set of instructions that help us understand how to use the hardware. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, on the concept of education as software for human hardware, and just your thoughts on that metaphor and that mental model. And yeah, let's just riff on that.
To me, there's quite a thin line. Like I know, as we've discussed before, there's that thin line between education being able to like empower you in the sense to give you direction to do this yourself, but at the same time, mainstream education at major universities have you doing all of these option classes and stuff that won't necessarily help you. And I love the terminology, keep it like simple, safe, and effective. It doesn't need to be too complicated. As long as you understand the basics, you're generally pretty good. So I love that, and I absolutely agree that education is a big kind of front of this. However, keeping it simple, and you don't need to know everything to kind of take responsibility. When the first time you mentioned this, kind of the topic of software for human hardware as education and things, I was currently reading a book. I believe it's called You Were the Placebo. It's by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a chiropractor, technically getting into a lot of neurology and things, to my knowledge. And I was reading it, and a part stuck out to me as soon as you kind of brought this up for the first time. I'll try to keep it brief, but he just kind of brought up how this one story talks about a lot of things about the placebo effect and the effect on the brain and stuff. One example he used was he was on a flight, I think, one time, and he saw a woman reading the book with like belief in the title. He didn't really know what else it said, but he just saw the word belief, and he asked her what it was about. And she technically said it was about like Christianity and faith, but she asked, "Why do you ask?" And he told her that he was writing a book on the placebo effect. And again, the word belief and things, they just kind of started talking. And she told him a story about how years ago she was diagnosed with like a gluten intolerance, basically like celiac disease, colitis, like inflammatory bowel disease, IBD stuff. All that caused like inflammations and ulcers and things in your digestive tract. Another host of like GI tract issues. She experienced chronic pain all the time, had a lot of health professionals try to advise her to avoid certain foods to make it better, a lot of prescribed drugs, all of this. Wasn't able to sleep, had skin rashes, digestive disturbances, other unpleasant symptoms. Anyways, years later, she went to see a new doctor, and that doctor decided to do some blood tests, and they found that all of the results were negative. Everything from what she'd been experiencing, just must misdiagnosis or who knows. She said the day that she found out that she was technically normal, it was like nothing was wrong. She said, "I'm fine." All of her symptoms went away. She was eating whatever she wanted, felt great. Insane to me. He was kind of saying, the author, how it's fascinating how new information like that can literally lead to like a 180-degree turnaround of everything we believe about ourselves, and how new beliefs can actually change our brain and body chemistry. It's crazy. And it retires that like old neurological circuitry of everything that we think we are, basically becoming like a different person. He goes on to list a bunch of other examples. This one just stuck out to me because he was literally kind of bringing up the education of software and stuff, and how it's becoming like increasingly important to us as like humans for hardware, about how we can, if we want to believe that we can change, we can absolutely change. Too many people believe that they're stuck with things like flat feet, bunions in our scenario of TFC a lot of the time, because their doctor diagnosed them like that, and they are now associating with that. But you're not always necessarily your illness. You're not always your diagnosis, sort of a thing. It was just a topic that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite sayings that I always bring this up with the family is like, if you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're right. And it just is an illustration of how powerful our thoughts are in what we're capable and not capable of doing or becoming or achieving. And it's not to say you can be like, I can fly and then jump off a building and fly, right? There's still some grounding in reality and physics and all that stuff. But I really think that fundamentally, if the individual is the only one that can improve their health by taking responsibility, then essentially all we're left with is helping people understand how to take better care of themselves and supporting them in their quest to do that. And I think I always used to think of like education, like online courses, for example. Like one thing we've talked a lot with the Aussie, in our meetings with the Aussie team is like the difference between an online course and software. Because at first glance, it's like, why are you calling it software? It's really just education or an online course. And I think for me, the distinction comes from when we first started at TFC, we created online courses, which was basically information, right? It was mostly informational. It's like, here's a map. Here's the information you need to take care of yourself. And the missing element there was it didn't actually focus enough on how to implement the information, right? Like all the information is great. And to be quite frank, I think we're overloaded with information. So applicable, like you were saying earlier, I think is the key, where it's like we don't actually need that much information. We just need to know the most important information. And that kind of ties into the golden rules when we get to that. But this idea that an online course gives you information, gives you the map, but software is essentially helping people apply the information. And that ends up being the more important point in the grand scheme of things, right? People come to our online courses, they're like, this is great, I know all these things, but like, how do I actually do these things? How do I actually go about implementing them? Because that's kind of the harder part. And I think with, if online courses or just information is the map, software is the compass to help you actually navigate the map, to help you actually implement the information you now have into your life, which turns out to be the more difficult part and is really the most important part. If you don't implement it, that information is kind of useless. So yeah, I think for me, it's just like everyone just needs a software update, right? That lady going to a new doctor got a major software update and her hardware immediately reacted differently because she just had a different perspective and was no longer kind of stuck in this notion that she must be diseased and feel all these things because someone told her she had this thing. So yeah, I agree. That was a great thing to bring up. I wonder, I'm sure that affected Joe in a way where he's like, all right, this is another little, touch point to say I'm on the right track here and placebo is important. And I don't even think the word placebo does it justice because it really is like, are you open-minded enough to actually feeling that you can feel good? Because if you're not, you've already made up your mind, right? And you're going to be right.
I love how you bring up the application of this stuff. One of the big things that I noticed in this just recent program I finished of this manual osteopathy is I'm all about the why. Why are we learning this? How can I kind of apply this sort of a thing? And that was the one question that I think is pretty relevant is like, yeah, why should I learn this? What is the point? And so many people could not answer me. It's like, this is the course material. This is what we're showing you and stuff. There's so many things. Why are we learning this test? When would I need to do this? Like for what condition? Or this and that sort of thing. And they were just so poor. It's like, no, well, this is the curriculum. This is what I'm getting paid to teach you and stuff. And it's like, well, is that passion for it not there sort of a thing to understand and realize this? So I was huge on that. And that's just it, is a lot of the time, like I said, we are crammed with information. We can hit the books to do that test in the future and stuff if you want. It's not going to make or break your like career in this or your health. So you got to know this or you're not going to get better. Not necessarily. So again, so a lot of people think you need to pay for this education and stuff. Not necessarily.
Yeah, I completely agree. When we're done in this chat, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how, being a person, you seem to be a person who thinks for yourself, how being a person who thinks for themselves handles going through a course where you're being told what to think. Because that, if I look back, if I am the human I am now and I go through physio school again, I'm going to have a way harder time.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it's like you pick and choose what you take out of it, right? You end up asking better questions and you end up really just you end up extracting the signal and sort of understanding how to separate the noise of things that maybe aren't as useful. And I think the fact, because were you a massage therapist before you took this course?
I was.
Yeah, so being someone that actually worked with humans in practice, I'm sure that was a pretty big benefit of like actually being able to go into a program knowing, having worked with people, knowing kind of like, okay, I can see how this is going to apply or this is going to help, and like maybe seeing, I don't know about that. That doesn't seem like something that would work in practice, even though in the book it sounds good, but I don't know if that actually works in practice.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the golden rules. So maybe what we'll do is, the golden rules are a fairly recent sort of mental model that we started to integrate at TFC. And, we've already plugged it into Health Kit, we've plugged it into footnote training, because I really think, the golden rules really encapsulate this quest to hone in on the essence, right? To simplify things. Because I think people, like we said, people are not struggling for information, they're struggling for clarity. And I think clarity comes by trimming away the inessential. And it's not to say that everything is completely unimportant, but like, what is the most important, right? If someone can only remember a few things top of mind, and just focuses on a few things and doing them consistently instead of just trying to do everything and then never really doing things consistent enough to have an adaptation, what are those things? And so we kind of carved out these 5, what I would call master heuristics, which are principles and aspirations, and they're action oriented, right? Like the problem with like giving someone, try to sit less, is that, well, it's like, what does that mean, right? Like, if I sit 1 minute less tomorrow, am I doing that? Is that all I need to do? So we tried to really carve out like concrete aspirational things that people can work towards achieving. And if you don't achieve them, it doesn't mean you're terrible or your body's going to fall apart. It just means like you have some work to do. So let's go through them, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And golden rule number 1 is wear natural footwear, spend time barefoot, and gradually eliminate unnatural footwear. So yeah, love to hear your thoughts on that.
This can get so deep. Again, that's one of the big questions. Wearing natural footwear, it's like I should transition. I've been told it's good, but should I now? Should I wait? Sort of a thing. I love the gradually eliminate it. Again, we talk about all the time. It's probably most important, arguably, to just start with at home, not wearing them. A lot of times we're maybe used to slippers, so maybe get a little bit wider socks, things like tabby socks or the 5-finger ones. If you're still at that point of being judged for wearing funny socks and things, I think, oh, well, I'm way past that point. I just embrace the fact, oh, you're wearing funny socks. Yes,
Yeah.
I am. But so at home where you won't be judged if you feel like that's a big thing. And starting again, community being one of the big things. If you feel like you're being judged for doing this, you're not going to want to, so you're not gonna in the end a lot of the time. So at home's usually the best. There's less obstacles, there's less possible dangers out as there would be on the street, in an alley, who knows. So it's a safer aspect. You can start doing exercises and things like that. Slowly get a pair, maybe wearing that work and stuff, but again, possibly depending how long you've been wearing normal footwear, how many conditions, things like plantar fasciitis or something you might have had or currently have, slowly. And if your feet are feeling like they're getting a little sore, maybe put them back on. So like, again, gradually going into it, doing it long enough so that it feels good and you want to do it, I feel. I don't know if I've ever told you how I even first got into this minimalist footwear.
No.
I went on a run. I went on a run one time. I was wearing my first, sorry, it wasn't a run, it was a walk. I was gradually getting into this. And at first, my first thought was, I love telling people the stories, like, these shoes don't breathe. This isn't very good or something. So my feet were super, super warm, kind of sweaty, sort of a thing. I was like, whatever, I'll try them again tomorrow. So I did, and it was really kind of the same. The third time I went on a walk, it was a rather windy day, and the breeze went right through them. And I was like, wait a second, it is breathable, sort of a thing. And what I had to kind of eventually put 2 and 2 together is that, oh my gosh, this is the first time my foot muscles have probably worked in like 20 years. sort of at whatever point I first kind of did this, I was like, oh my gosh. And it just blew my mind. And I started thinking more and more, and kind of what made me almost become the individual thinker and critical thinker that I think I am, is just like, oh, something just snapped in me. It's like, this just makes sense. Why doesn't this more people do this and stuff? And why I got so gung-ho into joining this community and wanting to do stuff, because until something like that maybe clicks in you that wants to do it again, like we talked about that previous placebo effect and stuff, once you want to, it's a no-brainer. And it's not even a question, should I transition? How should I transition? You'll find ways.
Yeah. And it is really, it's not about the why. Like, I think it's so funny. It's like natural footwear is just footwear that allows your foot to function naturally. So I think every human having the aspiration, desire, and will, and, you know, wanting to transition to natural footwear is a no-brainer. Like, that's not really up for debate. It's really, the important part is the how. How do you get there without causing yourself more problems, right? And I think that's where people need the most guidance, and that's where there's the biggest opportunity to really like go into the nuance of, you know, instead of needing to come to me every time you have a question about your foot feeling different, it's like, how do we empower? And this is what we do with Health Kit, is like, how do we empower people to feel confident that they can self-regulate, that they can know when they can do more, know when they need to back off and do less. And I think that fundamentally requires them to understand pain, what pain is, how to look at pain as a teacher and a guide, and something that is a signal to give you feedback that kind of nudges you in the right direction, instead of something to be avoided at all costs. Because the reality is, like, if you go to the gym for the first time and you do bench press, your chest is going to be pretty sore within a couple of days. It doesn't mean bench press is bad for you. It just means that maybe you did a little bit too much, or maybe you're using muscles for the first time ever. And I think the same thing happens with feet, where it's like people are like, oh, my feet are so sore after using those shoes. Maybe those shoes aren't for me. And what they really need is just a little bit of guidance to say, like, yeah, it's gonna, if you overdo it, you're gonna be sore. It doesn't mean you should ditch it altogether. It just means you have to kind of listen to what that signal is telling you, and maybe modify the pace that you're transitioning. So yeah, and even it kind of begs the question, like, what is natural footwear? And that's another big lesson that we teach in Health Kit, is just, you know, giving people the simple heuristic of the 4 F's, right? Foot shaped, flat, flexible, and feel, which feel really means a thin sole. And I think it's important to offer people the principles which they can then apply, right? If you tell them a shoe to buy, then when they go to the store and that shoe's not there, they're not really going to have any tools to be able to make a wise choice. Whereas if they kind of understand, okay, I know I want to look for these things, you know, what does the shape look like? Oh, it's pretty pointed. I don't think that's really a shoe I should be wearing. Or if I can't bend and twist it, you know, that might not allow my foot to articulate and move, and that's probably going to stiffen my foot up, right? If people can understand these very simple, basic, intuitive principles and know that, okay, my goal is to work into natural footwear. Spending a bit of time barefoot is good, but I don't have to go barefoot everywhere. Like, that's not necessary for foot health, but spending a bit of time barefoot is pretty good for you. And the really important thing is, like, over time, how do I eliminate all the shoes that are messing my feet up, right? All the shoes that are stiff, heel elevated, pointed, have a huge, thick cushioned sole. Because once you realize that those things aren't actually benefiting you and they're actually harming you, it's a totally different ballgame, and you can't really unsee it once you see it. So yeah, that's golden rule number 1. If you want to restore healthy feet, wear natural footwear, spend time barefoot, and over time eliminate the unnatural footwear that you might be wearing that's causing obstacles to getting back to having healthy feet. Golden rule number 2 is become capable of balancing on one leg barefoot with your eyes closed for 60 seconds without losing your balance. And I think the key element here is, if you can't do it, work towards it until you can, because quite frankly, it's actually a fairly challenging test to do. But I think what people underestimate is how quickly their balance improves, right? When I was practicing in the clinic as a physio, I always remember people would always say, oh, my balance is terrible. You know, I have bad balance. And it was like this, you know, back to the belief system. It's like they decided their balance was bad. So there was no point in ever thinking they could improve it, because it's just bad and that's how it is. And to me, that ended up sounding as silly as, well, my biceps are weak. It's like, well, do you know that you can make them stronger? Like, have you ever spent time making them stronger? Have you ever worked on your balance? And yeah, what are your thoughts on balance? How do you, you know, in the people you work with, do you see balance as this thing that people are care to work on? Or, you know, what has your personal story been in terms of training balance and the benefits you get from that?
I never really truly understood the importance of balance until I kind of got introduced to like TFC and like the balance beams, and it's such a simple product, it seems, as in like you can
Mm.
just kind of go and technically get going in the forest if you're comfortable, find a little like tree log and things. To me, it's nitty gritty to the fact that they're awesomely designed and the diameter is like perfect to really help like widen your toes out and things as well, to help with possible things like neuromas in the feet and things as well. I always like ranting about. But yeah, like I said, until I got my first beam with TFC, it was probably more of the fun exercises to be doing. Again, like if you're, I love your metaphor of, yeah, like, oh, you have weak biceps, have you thought of like trying to get them stronger by lifting weights, sort of a thing? It's one of those things we don't really think about, but people dread going to the gym in modern society a lot of the time. Like it takes a lot of discipline. A lot of times well, it's easier, it's way easier to just sit on the couch and go and do that. However, it's something pretty portable, it's something pretty light to just throw up. And like I said, it is more of the fun. Throw some music on, do whatever you kind of need to do. And like it was one of the more fun projects I was starting to do when I first started with kind of TFC. Like I said, your muscles are working, proprioception, the brain's trying to keep you there and stuff. It was fun to try. Okay, you know what? This is getting boring now. Let's try something else. And then there's a new balance technique, and there's this. Eventually, I kind of got to doing pistol squats on the beam, and I remember trying to do those on the ground when I was kind of first starting out, and now I was doing it on the beam and things. So it doesn't feel like exercise, yet you're training all this stuff all at once. It is kind of fun. I love the idea of cues. So again, if it's not really something you want to do, it's harder to put a squat rack in your living room. It's easy to kind of just put a beam there. So if going from the kitchen to your dining room and stuff, just go across the beam. So like I said, yeah, though that 2 minutes of playing around on the beam, transitioning from living room to the TV room or whatever, is still better than nothing, and just kind of introducing to be fun sort of a thing. Yeah, it was a great premise. So important.
Yeah, I think balance is such a underestimated thing, and I think the reason it's in the golden rule is, number one, to emphasize the fact that balance is important, especially as people get older. I mean, if you can't balance, I think there's something like, if you can't balance on one foot for 60 seconds, you're far more at risk of hurting yourself. And when you get older, breaking a hip from a fall actually becomes like really, really dangerous in terms of survivability. So I just think, yes, 1 minute eyes closed on flat ground barefoot is hard, but it's not so hard that people can't achieve it. And I think it's good to have an ambitious aspiration, right? Like if your balance is pretty good, and I would say that if you can close your eyes, balance on one leg for 60 seconds without losing your balance, you have pretty good balance. Why wouldn't we aspire to that? And if we're not there, it's fine. It's just like work towards it. Give people something, that's worth working towards, and it's challenging enough that it's not just easy to get to, right? And I think the idea that one leg, eyes closed, flat ground barefoot requires no equipment means that like literally you can do it anytime. You can do it if you're cooking something in the kitchen. I mean, maybe don't do it near the oven when it's on or something like that. But the idea that you could do it anytime, you could check in on your hip stability and foot stability, because that's what the balance is. Like how well does your hip communicate to your foot? How fast do they communicate, and how well do they adapt to challenge? It's a lot baked into just the word balance, but the idea that you can check in anytime, doesn't require any equipment, it's free, and a minute is a decent enough aspiration that like it gives you something to work towards, and anyone can get there. I think that's a powerful golden rule, because despite being so simple, it just gives people something concrete to work towards. So that's golden rule number 2. Golden rule number 3 is become capable of adopting a pain-free, relaxed resting squat position for 2 minutes. If you can't get there, work towards it until you can. And I think the squat is just this beautiful master screen and this fundamental human position that many people have lost the ability to do. I believe in the iteration of the Foot Nerd program that you went through, I think a feet together resting squat was one of the projects. What has been your, I guess, personal experience with the resting squat position, how it felt, initially when you first tested it, how it is now, and even in like patients, clients, other students that were in your program? What are your thoughts on the squat, its utility as like a master screen, and should people be working towards restoring a squat, and why?
So you are right. It was a little bit different of the resting squat versus the one when I was taking the program, like a foot together squat for, I think it was a minute, if I'm not mistaken. That was the hardest challenge I did at TFC. And it was one of the ones that a lot of the other students and stuff that I was working with, they're just like, oh man, I was the biggest I've ever been in running at the time. So I was running a lot, and at the most I have in my natural footwear. So I always joke with people, you don't really need a calf day at the gym if you're running in natural footwear. Just that eccentric loading of the calves all the time. It feels like so, but you need that amount of dorsiflexion of your foot to kind of be able to have those toes to nose to be able to try and actually balance instead of just slowly tipping back. So yeah, it was one of the, so I actually had to technically stop running, or I started running a little bit less to focus on maybe like rolling things out and stretching and trying to kind of get some of that dorsiflexion to try and get that challenge down pat. I would argue that this golden rule is probably one of the ones that apply to the software, education of software for human hardware sort of a thing, because there can be some times where if you have not achieved this yet, if you have a possible desk job where you're sitting for how many hours a day, and if you're not getting up and moving, and let's say you try and get in a resting squat position and you just like, okay, you're falling over, it's uncomfortable, something's pinching in your hip, you maybe don't have that amount of mobility in your ankle. What now? Like, what would you do? Like, yeah, that pinch sensation's in my hip. What should I do? So again, that's maybe where something like a health kit will come into play, or maybe some YouTube videos, maybe going to see a healthcare practitioner, have it be chiropractor or massage therapist, a family doctor almost, maybe even, who might kind of have an idea of what stretches to maybe be doing, or
as long as make sure they can squat before you go see them for advice. Yeah, that's a good start.
Hey doc, can I see your resting squat before I take any advice?
Exactly.
But yeah, I would to me, for me doing this, if I didn't have the background I did, I would kind of be like, well, yeah, like I can't do that. So what are some things I can try to do to achieve or gain that resting squat then? So yeah, things like that. And then again, trying to get that community around you, where instead of, I always found it so funny that we live in this culture that is always so sitting. You go to an interview, oh, please have a seat, or you're standing, you're awkward at the party. Oh, do you want a chair or anything? No, thanks, I'm good. Like, you seem like the outcast. So like, that's what it's a little bit odd. Where I always talk about, yeah, like I love floor living sort of a thing, ground living, trying to open up hips a little bit more, do this and that to just have this come naturally. Because once you got it, it is crazy looking back and thinking like, wow, I couldn't do that before. And I'm glad I'm kind of able to now, where again, I'm less scared to grow older and possibly fall and break something, or like, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah, it is such a, I remember like one of my first Kelly Starrett videos I ever watched, it was like an online seminar he was giving, and he was talking about like feet, hip width apart, barefoot, bodyweight squat. And I was like, oh yeah, that seems straightforward enough. And I could not do it. I wasn't even anywhere close to being able to do it. And I was like, wow, I'm a physical therapist teaching people how to move. I can't even do a squat. And the way he worded it was like, this is a fundamental baseline human position that everyone should be capable of. If you can't, something's not working like it's supposed to. And it was like a real gut punch for me. I was like, wow, I can't even do this thing. It's like, what am I doing teaching? Should I even be a physio? Like, it kind of was this existential crisis. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to work towards this. And, I just realized my ankles were so locked up because I had never actually explored that position. I never actually put myself at end range dorsiflexion. So why would my body be able to go there if I've never actually put it there, right? It kind of made sense. It's like, well, if I start putting myself there, my body will adapt. And I just kind of deeply believe that. And now every day I do squats before I make my coffee, and it's just a good check-in because I'll rest in the squat. I'll even read in the squat position now because it's really comfortable. But it wasn't initially. And I'm so glad that I kind of had the perseverance to work towards it, because now, if I have to go down and pick something up, or if if I'm getting out of chairs, the last place I lived at, I didn't even have any chairs. So basically put me on the ground. I was ground living, and I was using the squat and kneeling positions. And that it's like, I didn't have to do any extra mobility work because my lifestyle became my mobility work. And once you have it, it can be really hard to restore it if you've lost it. But then as long as you use it every day, the maintenance is actually very low because you just have to incorporate it into your life. So, yeah, I think the resting squat position is an important aspirational position for people to work towards. And I think the idea that, you know, being in a resting squat position comfortably for 2 minutes, being able to breathe calmly and not sweating and not struggling, I think confirms that, like, yeah, you own that position now. And so golden rule number 3 is really about work towards that. And like you said, health kit is sort of like the compass that helps people troubleshoot. Well, if I can't get into a squat position, where is the problem? Like, where should I focus on? And we have some screens in there that help people kind of identify, like, here's a way to screen your hip, see if your hip's the problem. Here's how you screen your ankle in isolation, see if your ankle's the problem. And then if those are the issue, then here's some experiments you can do to see about opening up those areas or restoring some hardware mobility, and then retesting your squat to confirm whether you're actually making progress or not. So that's golden rule number 3. Golden rule number 4 is pretty related, not directly related to the hip, but has to do with chair sitting, because I think chair sitting is actually what kills our ability to get into a squat. So golden rule number 4 is limit your chair sitting to 4 hours or less per day. Like, work towards that. And when chair sitting, move every 30 minutes if possible. And I always remember asking patients, after going through Kelly Surratt stuff, I would always ask patients in the clinic, how much time do you spend sitting in a chair each day? And they would throw out these numbers, 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever. And then I would kind of go through, like, okay, well, does that include the amount of time you're spending sitting in a car, at work, at a desk, at home, at meals, on the couch at the end of the day when you watch TV? And they would actually go through and they're like, wow, like, it's like 2 to 2.5 times what I thought it was. And I just wasn't, it's so normalized, right? Everything we do revolves around sitting. Like you said, if you're at a party and you're not sitting, people are like, are you okay? Do you want a chair? Do you need a chair? Like, we don't want you standing or sitting on the ground. And it's like, actually, I'm good. Like, accumulating a shitload of time sitting is like basically detraining hip mobility. And I think that even that, for some people I've worked with clicks, it's like, well, think of how much time you spend sitting. And if you consider sitting detraining your hip mobility, you're spending a lot of time every day detraining your hip mobility. So why would you have access to anything except for that position? And yeah, what are your thoughts on the 4 hours and the idea of getting up and moving every 30 minutes, even if it's just for short periods of time? Like, do you think that's achievable? Just your thoughts on sitting in general.
Being a massage therapist, I'm huge into fascia. And if anyone doesn't really know what that is, it's just one of the kind of the most abundant connective tissues in the body. And I could be mistaken. I think they say, like, fascia, this connective tissue kind of starts to build up in your body after like 2 hours. And yeah, I always like to kind of say, like, so the duration of a movie, if you're sitting down the whole movie, you don't get up to go to the washroom or anything, you stand up at the theater and you're like, oh man, have to take a huge stretch. It's because that, like, buildup of connective tissue in your body it's not moving, it's not being malleable, it's kind of molding to that position to help you be comfortable in that one position for so long. So a lot of times that's what poor posture kind of turns into, is if you don't get up every 4 hours, that stuff keeps building. It keeps building this connective tissue. It's like it wants to keep you in that position. It's like, if your body is doing you a favor, if you want to stay in this position for so long, we'll kind of help you. But if you want to be here for 8 hours a day, we'll make it easier for you. But then it's when it starts to affect your other activities of daily living. Now, when you can't throw a baseball with your son, or you can't reach the thing in the top cupboard, or like I said, your hips are so stiff you can't do some of these things that you want to, then it's kind of start to, okay, how can I maybe address this? And starting to spend less time in your chair and open up those hips and stuff are like key, are ideal. I think it was something you said a while ago that really resonated with me, is if you work an 8-hour a day desk job and you go to the gym for 2 hours after, you're still living a sedentary lifestyle. And it's something that I say often to a lot of people, is like, a lot of people go, oh, I'm healthy, I get up on the treadmill and stuff after I'm doing that. If the majority of the day you're in that position, or if you're in those not very good for you footwear most of the day, it's still affecting you negatively and ultimately at the end of the day. It's a shame, but like I said, trying to just make this second nature, get up every now and then sort of a thing, even if you almost don't feel like you need to, make it a habit, be better in the long run.
Yeah, I think the value of having an actual number there, as arbitrary as that might be, is that people now actually have to see, like, where am I, right? Like, do an audit of how much chair sitting you do, and you'll probably shock yourself at how much time we accumulate sitting in chairs during the day. And, back to your thing about the sedentary people that go into the gym, is like, the most common category of human that I treated in clinic were sedentary exercisers. They weren't necessarily the people who were sedentary all the time. They were the people who layered on reps, load, and intensity on top of a body that didn't know how to move. And so, it's unfortunate, but if you sit all day, exercise actually is probably not good for you. Like, it's bad for you. It's not, everyone thinks, oh, exercise is great for you. It's like, yes, but moving poorly for periods of time might be worse for you than not moving at all, right? Like, you should probably move, but if you get rid of the part that you're basically training your body to not move well all day by sitting in a chair, you're going to get way more out of your exercise, and you're probably going to mitigate the risk of getting hurt by layering load and reps on top of poor movement patterns. So yeah, so that's golden rule number 4. And then the last one is really more of a mindset one, and that's adopt a long-term mindset, trust the process, know that it's not a race, and showing up every day to do something to better yourself is the objective. And I think really what that gets at is, like, most people who are dysfunctional or have issues with their feet or their hips underestimate how long it took to form those issues, right? Like, if you spent a decade squishing your feet into shoes, you're probably not going to change your whole body's, morphology or function in like a couple of weeks, right? And so this idea that if you trust that your body is this self-healing, self-organizing organism that adapts to what you expose it to, really the goal is give it better inputs to adapt to, right? Remove the inputs that is causing it to adapt in ways that you don't desire, and reintroduce inputs that allow your body to adapt in a positive direction and adapt in healthy ways. So I think just taking a long-term mindset, showing up every day, doing small little things each day and stringing those together, you can get massive exponential gains by just doing tiny things each day consistently. And I think really what HealthKit aims to do is, like, the commitment is 30 minutes a day for 42 days. And that's not to say your issues are going to be gone after 42 days. Those 42 days are so that you can understand basic principles, learn how to self-regulate, and basically build habits, right? Like, build the habit of showing up every day in your health process so that you can then explore and continue that process moving forward, and, have this compass to revert back to and review again if you ever need the help again. And yeah, what are your thoughts on just this idea of health being a long-term process, and even your personal experience with maybe incorporating that philosophy?
I would so important. Getting a little personal here. Again, over the past year doing my osteo program, it was a full-time program. I had 3 different jobs. I teach massage at 2 different colleges. I was doing my own massage practice at the time, trying to keep up with everything. I'm a people pleaser, if it's not obvious. I'm trying to, like, kind of, again, learn when to say no, try to do what's best for me a lot of the time still. But I found myself, I put on more weight than I started to fall back into old habits of, I don't have much time to maybe cook. I should be studying. I could exercise, but I should be doing that because I haven't this week yet. I should be doing, so it was just this horrible battle of, I'll just a microwave food, just this sort of a thing. Like, I'll just quickly do that. And it's like, so it was just this horrible mental battle of trying to, like, oh, I feel this is probably better. I lost a lot of old good habits that I had. I'm maybe not trying to move as much because, again, instead of going to the gym, well, I've been working the rest of this week. I should try moving. So, like I said, it was just this horrible. And again, another reason why small doses of knowledge might be better than mainstream schooling a lot of the time if you don't tailor things like to help manage life like that. I definitely should have cut back on work, but I love what I do. I'm a yes man sort of a thing. So it was just kind of this bad. So, but again, now that it is over, I made that decision to not quit and do that stuff. Now I'm still trying to be better, still trying to get some of those old habits back. Let's get some of that mobility back. Let's try eating a little bit better and stuff, this and that, now that I am able to. Still trying to look on the bright side, not just be like, well, I lost that resting squat position. Whoops, sorry, like, I'm normal again, sort of a thing. Who knows? Whether it's mindset, helping someone, changing your footwear, habits like that, anything, just like I said, 1% better every day. We've discussed before. Love that mindset.
Yep. Well said. And I mean, a lot of that resonates with me, right? I kind of have been flowing through periods of my life where, I know I'm not doing things that I hate the word should, because I think this, like, need to, should, I've kind of tried to drop those from my lexicon, because I think I think it's really just a victim mentality of, like, oh, I should be doing this, but the world is stopping me. It's like, no, if I really want to
Right.
do something and it's important, it's like, I'm going to do it. But this idea that begin again, right? This notion that at any point in time, start with a tiny little thing, show up and do it every day, and then build on it and build momentum slowly over time. You don't have to do everything all at once, because I think I've tried to do that in the past and I fail miserably, or I get demotivated or frustrated. And yeah, I just think people underestimate how much progress can be made by just doing small things consistently and stringing together consistency and really building momentum and confidence, and like this idea that, wow, I did something that got me 1% better. I can feel good about that. I might not be doing all these things that I do want to work on, but I can't do it all at once anyway. So that, it's just like show up, do one thing, be a tiny bit better, and just trust the fact that my body knows how to adapt. And if I give it the right stuff and care for it, it's got my back. And I think that's a really important thing for people to kind of keep in mind, because everyone wants it right now, right? Everyone wants to be better right now. And that's just not how the body works. And if we just are mindful that adaptation takes time, it's not a race. Health is a long-term game. Restoring foot function is a long-term game. There's not actually a destination you get to. It's about the process. And if you just show up every day and sort of like, celebrate that you did something today, you get really far in actually not that long. You just have to kind of, anchor down in that long-term philosophy. So, yeah, those are the golden rules, and I'm pretty stoked on having those sort of plugged into our core software with HealthKit, into Foot Nerd training, where the first 6 weeks is essentially doing a deep dive into HealthKit, where you go, twice as deep as the average person going through HealthKit, and just this idea that simple is good. Simple doesn't mean easy, right? For some people, sitting for 4 hours or less a day might not be easy. But once again, it doesn't have to be done all right now. And I think the idea of having simple heuristics, only 5 of them, they're very simple, they're all achievable by anyone over a long enough period of time. I really think that simple holds us accountable, right? Like when we complexify things, we give ourselves the opportunity to get distracted in novelty or new things. When in reality, it's like you can't hide from simple. And by doing the simple, important things consistently, and I think the key there is like, if you're going to make these golden rules, they better be things that are actually the most important. And in my life and in my observations with people in TFC at events, or even in our digital community, it's like, if you wear natural footwear, if you train your balance, if you work on your squat position, limit your sitting, and take a long-term mindset, yeah, there's other stuff you can be doing. But if you're not doing those things consistently, I think there's a low-hanging fruit there. And that's really what the golden rules are about, is like, keep it simple, allow for focus, avoid getting distracted, be consistent, and powerful transformations happen. And yeah, so that's the golden rules, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We're getting good feedback on the golden rules so far, but yeah, it'll be a constantly evolving thing. But I think those heuristics, those rules of thumb, will be plugged in for a while, because it's like, it would take some really compelling information for me to say, yeah, this is more important than one of these golden rules, because I think they cover a lot. And even packed in, I mean, those are simple lines, right? Like in HealthKit, we're really going to unpack what that means, because wear natural footwear, spend time barefoot, and eliminating unnatural footwear can mean very different things depending if you're just starting your journey or if you're really advanced. And same thing with all the other heuristics, to be quite frank, all the other golden rules. So, how people apply those in their lives will change based on where they're at. But I think the idea that everyone should have these sort of clear, concrete standards to work towards, and knowing that I feel my truth is like, everyone can achieve those if they just work at it in small doses every day. I think that gives people the clarity that helps them take action, instead of just being paralyzed by, I don't know what to do, there's so many things I can do, screw it, it's just too hard. I think sometimes that can be the reaction people get by just being overwhelmed by information. And I certainly have been there in the past. So
Couldn't agree more.
We were going to talk about, we did talk about balance training, so I don't know if we have to really dive into the nitty-gritty of that. Maybe on a future community call, we can go real. We could spend an hour on just balance, and what is balance, why is it important, all the benefits you get, and all that stuff. But I think we got 8 minutes left. Let's dive into some community questions. So maybe I'll read the question, and then if you want to have a crack at giving some input, and then I'll riff on it as well. We have 3 of them, but I don't know if we'll get through them all, because there's there's some nuance to get into with these. So question number one, I've been diagnosed with sinus tarsi syndrome on my left foot since the end of March 2022. There was no trauma. It just sparked off due to overuse of plyometrics and my excessively pronated feet. Unfortunately, the inflammation hasn't gone down properly for me to return to sport, which is football. I've done everything from cortisone injection, orthotics, diligent rehab, and rest. Is there any way I'm able to reduce inflammation? It's been a very challenging time for me. Any help would be appreciated. I work as a personal trainer / coach. Most of the time I'm on my feet. I currently wear ASICs with custom-made orthotics. This has recently helped me create space in my ankle joint when standing, so the pain in that department has almost gone. However, running, cutting, etc. is the issue. I'm aware the next step is going to barefoot shoes, or as we will call them, natural shoes. However, I'm not sure when to transition and how to do so, as there still seems to be bruising in some areas. So you want to have a crack at maybe giving this human a little bit of input, and then I'll do the same.
Awesome. Regarding, I guess, your first question regarding like trying to get inflammation down, possibly. Inflammation's tough. I like to think as inflammation as the body's like natural like splinting mechanism. Usually, like if something's wrong, it starts swelling, trying to kind of tell your body like, "Hey, stop moving this." The RICE protocol, rest, ice, compression, elevate, is pretty popular, but I would advise against it. Just simply like if the pain's that unbearable, maybe put some ice on it and stuff. But generally, again, inflammation's kind of a good thing, I would argue. So again, using those cues. Do you need to do something different if it is swelling, trying to learn from it instead of just throw ice or medication at the problem, I would say. Possibly try to find like a manual lymphatic drainage specialist near you. I know they will do some things with fluids in the body, and they might be able to reroute things a little bit specifically. It's possible. Maybe I know there's like kinesiology taping stuff a certain way that will help reduce inflammation as well. So maybe stuff to look into with a practitioner near you. That's not necessarily things you can do directly, but maybe some answers for the inflammation. As far as everything else, I was trying to read over as you're talking. The cortisone injections, the orthotics, it is a short-term solution. That's really all it will probably do. Is it might help put space in that area for now, but it will probably do nothing but get worse. Your muscles will slowly start to get weaker and stuff, I would argue. So I would say that trying to maybe do something like TFC's foot and ankle kit, trying to again maybe get answers, trying to get some movement, try and either counteract those orthotics, possibly switch to natural footwear. But again, being cautious. If you know your body best, trying to slowly get into it, not so quickly. Trying to use the health kit for answers, etc., etc. Anything different you'd add, Nick?
Yeah, I think health kit is the exact reason. We designed health kit for humans like this who are frustrated, who've tried a bunch of things, who aren't making progress. And I think progress really has to start from updating your software, right? Gain a deeper understanding of how to self-regulate, how the body works, what is pain, right? What is inflammation? All these things really, when you have an understanding of it, make a lot more sense. Sinus tarsi syndrome is this sort of persistent anterolateral ankle pain. I used to see them following an ankle sprain, like stubborn ankle sprain that just wasn't going in the right direction, but it can also be from overload. Pain is a signal that something's wrong. It's not the enemy. So I think even just really buckling down on if you understand that to be true, then cortisone really just masks your symptoms. And if your pain is your guide for healing, when you block the signals, you inhibit your ability to self-regulate, right? You all of a sudden get rid of the signal that actually guides you to what to do and what not to do. So it kind of just gives you permission to overdo it and irritate it even more. So I would say, for this person, kind of falling back on the golden rules and how the body adapts, it's like ASICs are unnatural. They're rigid, they're pointed. It's essentially a disadvantage to your foot function like it should. So I would get out of those. Orthotics are unnatural, right? Slowly work your way out of those, allow your foot to sort of adapt and start to function naturally again. And just give yourself a chance to receive clear signals, right? If your body has clear signals and natural inputs, it's going to adapt in a positive direction, right? That can mean natural footwear, getting into kind of a daily routine to mobilize your foot, to put your ankle at end range, seeing what hurts, what doesn't. And then, like I said, like going through health kit and really making a commitment that 30 minutes a day for 42 days, you're going to understand sort of the first principles, embed some habits, and really get an understanding of how to self-regulate. I think that's probably, the path, right? And our guarantee with HealthKit is if you don't find HealthKit helpful after those 42 days, we give you your money back, because if it didn't help, you shouldn't pay. So but really focus on not masking the pain, because the pain is your friend, it's your teacher. If you ignore your teacher, it's really hard to get clarity on where you should be going. And then check out HealthKit and see if that helps. All right, question number 2, and this will be the last one. My name is Lenka, and I'm from Serbia. I have a son who's 3 years old now. He was diagnosed with metatarsus varus when he was 3 months old, but different doctors had different opinions on treatment. When he was 1.5 years, he started wearing orthopedic shoes, but for a short time only. When he was 2.5 years, he started wearing them more regularly because he started going to kindergarten. So he's been wearing them there for about 4 to 5 hours a day since. I don't see much improvement, and we're not sure what to do. What can you tell me about metatarsus varus? Should it be treated with orthopedic shoes, or what else should we do? Can we solve it at all, or will it stay like that? Little puppy barks there. Sorry about that, everyone. That's Rosie saying hi to everyone on the video. Give me a sec, gotta find where it was. Will it stay like that? Will it change? Will we achieve minor changes, or is surgery an option? So that was a question from Lenka. And yeah, Jason, you want to have a crack at that, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
You are right. These are some loaded questions. I love it, but yeah.
Very loaded, very loaded. And the best answer might be another question or a non-answer, but we'll give a crack. We'll have a crack.
So as quick as I kind of can, to respect everyone's time watching, metatarsus varus, to my knowledge, it can happen to various parts in the body. In this case, your like tarsal, your toes are kind of being pointed like inwards, more or less, like not your toe as in like your digit necessarily, but your whole, like your palm would basically be in your foot, sort of a thing. To my knowledge, treatment's rarely needed. It usually resolves itself. I would always be encouraging healthy movement, what I know I love to call like toga, maybe some stretching of the foot, rolling out the bottom of the foot and things. Despite his age and stuff, maybe giving it a try. Like I said, just that healthy movement, hopefully things will kind of resolve itself. I know that, again, depending who you talk to, again, doctors, like you said, have varying positions on it. Some people might be trying to push surgery. I wouldn't personally recommend it, unless it maybe doesn't correct itself at maybe, how old did they say? 3-year-old, maybe another year or so before maybe it isn't going to correct itself. They might kind of start recommending surgery. Again, I would be trying your best to not have such an invasive fix like that, because again, surgeries usually involve screws or plates and stuff that will do nothing but, again, kind of cause havoc, unfortunately, in the future, I would argue. So, and then also being careful with orthotics, because like normal shoes, bunions might even start correcting if you're at your digit here goes in, your toe is also following it. So then in normal pointed footwear, it also might give worse bunions and stuff too in the future. So being careful with orthotics and just normal shoes, sort of a thing, to that extent might be undoing all the possible work you're trying to put in to fix it. But that's my take.
Yeah, I guess I would start by saying, every case is unique and nuanced. So there's only so much we can offer in the digital world with from a description without being able to observe movement. And what I would say is that when I was in clinic, I saw a lot of kids, and I was always a little bit flabbergasted when a kid comes in, moving fine, not in pain, feeling okay, but the parents are super worried. It's like when the parent is more worried than the kid, I'm always a little bit skeptical, where it's like, our bias to intervene, especially with young kids, in my experience, always causes more harm than benefit, right? Like, if we just trust that, kids will look different, they'll have different bodies, and it doesn't mean that we should try and push them to fit this certain mold of like, normal or I always thought it was so weird where like we put kids in these weird devices because this weird tendency that we think we know better than the body. It's so silly, right? Like the human ego sort of stems from a foundational understanding that humans know better than the body. And I think there's something missing where our fundamental belief that the body is incredible, and it heals itself and it organizes itself efficiently. And it's just up to us to provide it the right inputs, right? If you give that kid a rich environment for movement, lots of play, and just kind of listen to them, if they're complaining, it's a different story. But if they're fine and they're happy and they're moving, if their foot looks a little bit different, if their toes are pointing a little bit more inward, if it was my kid, I'd be like, just let him be a kid, right? Especially at 3 years old. It's like, I just find it so odd that we have this impetus to intervene with these wonky ass tools, and we actually end up inhibiting optimal development, thinking that we're doing it a service. I just think it's really weird. So, if it was my kid, I can't tell them what to do, but if it was my kid, get them out of shoes, let them play a lot, have them have a really rich movement environment, and just make sure they're doing okay. Like monitor, see if they're limping or moving weird or complaining about pain. That's different, but be very hesitant with surgery, especially at a young age, and really just let the kid be a kid. Get them out of shoes, get them out of these orthopedic rigid things, and yeah, just monitor from there, because I think we actually do way more harm than good by trying to think we know better than the body. And as long as we make sure that the kid has an opportunity to be a kid and move and play and move a ton, let them go barefoot, let them wear natural footwear, and just observe the marvel of the human body and how well it adapts and how well it functions without any intervention. Yeah, that would be my thoughts. It's just, I just find it so weird how we just love to do shit. Yeah, thanks. Cool. Well, that's it. I think we did pretty good on time. We're only 5 minutes over. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time, for being a foot nerd, for being in this community, and helping answer those questions and just riffing off the topics that we covered today. For anyone who's listening, feel free to comment on YouTube or send Ruth an email. Ruth is like our tribe mother. She's the one who is the first point of contact. If you have further questions, feel free to send them to nerdhelperteam@gmail.com. We do these calls every month. The day might vary a little bit. Mostly the calls are live, so if you tune in, you get priority. If you have questions, tune in, and we'll do our best to answer. There's usually a panel of foot nerds that show up and give their energy, kindly donate their energy to do these. Jason, anything to say before we wrap this up?
Keep moving, sit less, make it a game, have fun. Like I said, devoting my time. Like I said, that community aspect, being there, helping out other people, gives me that aspiration. Other people are trying to do the same and stuff. Helps everyone out. Be vocal. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, good nuggets there. I think we actually spent some time defining, like really unpacking, like, what does community mean? What does it mean to be a community member who's contributing and giving value to the community, right? Beyond just like paying for something. And what we really, sort of the essence we boiled down a couple of days ago, was being a valuable community member means sharing your story, witnessing the story of others, and just actively engaging and being willing to share and willing to witness and really have people feel seen. So I think it's just, we're going to be, actually, the big focus of 2023 for TFC is really create a rich community experience. And sort of, we have all these things that are done with TFC, all these separate communities. We have the Instagram community, the YouTube community, the foot nerd community. One of our big goals is to harmonize all these separate communities and bring everything into one community platform that's clear, concise, simplify everything, and kind of like make sure everything is connected and integrated instead of all these separate parts. So we're going to be working on that. We're working on an implementation for mid-year to bring everything into one community platform and to offer just a better experience. So stay tuned for that. Engage, share your story. Thanks again, Jason, for doing this. Thanks for everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time.